Do you want to hold it? Yeah, okay. That way you got something to do with your hands.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Good morning. You can go ahead and go to the next one. I was sitting on a Persian rug, drinking some steaming saffron tea with my friend Hannah. And we had done this many times before. Hannah is from Iran, and this is the way that you spend time together and get to know your friends as you sit down for tea. And Hannah is a refugee, as many Iranians are that I've been working with in Athens. And she had been about a year in our refugee integration house that we run in Athens. And she is not a believer. She is a Muslim. And we had had many conversations about the gospel during this year that we had developed a friendship and were spending time together. She was coming to our Bible studies. She was asking questions, but she hadn't made a faith decision. So this day, we were sitting together and drinking tea, but today was the last day that we would have tea together because Hannah had a lot of very serious medical problems, and she and her mother had gotten permission to go to Germany so that she could get the medical care that she needed and she couldn't get in Greece. So this was our last visit, and I had been praying about it. And as we were sitting, I shared the gospel clearly with Hannah. It wasn't the first time that she'd heard it. And she sat and she listened. And at the end, she looked at me really earnestly and she said, "I understand what you're saying." She said, I get it. And I'm so interested to know more about this Jesus, but all my family is Muslim. This is our culture. I can't do that to my family. I can't make that decision right now. And I was just crushed. She did leave. She went to Germany with her mom. And I was asking the Lord, why, God? I thought she was so close, but she didn't come to faith. Well, Hannah's story's not over. I'm going to get back to that in just a few minutes because her story represents so many of the refugees that I have gotten to know while I've been in Athens. And so you can go to the next slide. When I talk about working with refugees, one of the first things that a lot of people will ask me about, well, who are the refugees? I mean, what does that mean? Who are these people? And I think it's a good question because not everybody that leaves their home is necessarily a refugee. And so you can see here that a refugee is different than, for example, an economic migrant or someone that leaves for better education or to try and find a better job. What we've found in Athens is actually most of the refugees who are coming in very highly educated, very skilled, had very comfortable, normal lives in their countries. And what we see is that refugees are people that are not leaving for a better life, but they're literally leaving to save their lives and the lives of their families. You can go to the next one. Besides asking who are the refugees, people will ask me, why am I in Greece? If you want to work with people from the Middle East, why Europe and why Greece specifically? And the answer to that is basically geography, because if you look at a map here of where Greece has been and still is really a connection point between Europe and Africa and the Middle East, Turkey. And so culturally and in so many other ways, it's a connection point. So now there are some refugees from Africa. They're also going to Italy. But the vast majority of refugees in the last several years are coming from Middle Eastern countries. And they end up in Turkey. And they're looking for freedom, right? That's what they're trying to find. And so for most of them, that is Europe. So if you want to get to Europe and you're a refugee, your first touch point is going to be Greece. So most refugees will, as you saw in the first picture that was up here, will leave from Turkey, take rubber rafts together with several other refugees across the sea a few hours and land on one of the Greek islands. And it's a very dangerous trip. Every year there are hundreds that have drowned and that are lost. But most of them see no other out for their family. So they get to these islands, and from there they're processed. They come to Athens, and then they're able to go to other European countries. So you can go to the next one. The UNHCR, which is the arm of the UN that works with refugees, they put out this really staggering statistic recently that 1 out of every 88 people on Earth today is a refugee or an IDP. IDP stands for internally displaced person. So refugees leave their country, cross borders, but IDPs are people who stay in their country that they are from, but they are still in refugee camps or in shelters because their homes have been destroyed or they've had to leave for another reason. So if you can even put in your mind a number like that, 1 out of every 88 people on Earth today has been forced from their homes. And I can also tell you that when I was first starting the process of going to Greece 6 years ago, that number was 1 out of 113. So you can see in just a span of a few years how much this crisis, refugee crisis, it's not going away, but it's not only continuing, it's growing and it's continuing to happen. And it's something that is really affecting the entire world. And so it's also something that's very critical for missions, I think, because it is not just in one place. It's something that is really global, what God is doing. You can go to the next slide. Kind of the tagline that I adopted when I started planning to go to Europe was serving the unreached in reachable places. Because I remember being a little girl in Sunday school and praying for the Middle East and us saying, God, would you send missionaries to these countries that are so dark and so closed? And would you help get Bibles into these people, and praying for that. And that has been happening. The church is growing in these countries, but God has not seen fit to open wide the doors for missionaries to just come in openly and share. But what he has decided to do is to bring so many of these people to places now where they can hear the gospel for the first time, where they are free to meet Christians, to ask for a Bible, to ask spiritual questions. And if you look at the places where many of these people are coming from, this is just a few that are up here. I mean, families coming from Syria are in a country that was just completely devastated by ISIS, and there's just no infrastructure left there to live. And people are coming from Afghanistan, which has no government overseeing it, so you have nobody who's actually making sure that people are taken care of in that country. Then you have Iran. And for many people, Iran's not a country that you think of having refugees because they have a stable government, but Iran is very oppressive politically and religiously. If you are a Christian in Iran, it's just known that you will probably disappear and no one will hear from you again. So we see many Christians that are coming out of Iran because of persecution. So basically, overall, what you see in this is that the Middle East is a broken place. It's a dark place, but it is a place that God is working. And we see that he heard those prayers from so many years ago for the Middle East. He's hearing our prayers today, and he is continuing to work, and he's answering. So you can go to the next slide. This is something that really just kind of stopped me in my tracks and got me so excited about doing work in Greece. Because we've really never seen an opportunity like this in all of history. What we are seeing right now, the opportunities we have to reach these people from so many parts of the world. As I said, many people, it's the first time they meet a Christian. So my friend Hannah that I talked about in the beginning, the first time she came to a Bible study at our church, and it was in Farsi, her language. We were talking about the biblical prophets, because most Muslims do respect the prophets of the Bible, but they just don't believe that their prophecies point to the Messiah being Jesus. And she came, and during the first lesson, she raised her hand, and she said, I just want to make a comment about something. And she stood up, and she said, you know, this is the first time in my life, and she was in her early 30s at this point, first time in my life that I've been invited to ask questions, like to question what I believe about God, to ask spiritual questions. She just was marveling that we had this freedom to do that. She's like, you know, I was never even allowed to think, this is what you believe, and that's it. And that's the story for so many refugees. This is an opportunity for God to work in their lives, for them to hear the gospel. And we also are seeing that it's Christians that are the ones helping refugees coming in. So it's really not the government, it's definitely not other Muslims, but it's Christians. And that's despite a lot of fear and a lot of prejudice that people have from people coming in from the Middle East and only seeing what they see on the news, never having met someone from that culture. It's really difficult. But we're seeing God breaking down those walls, and refugees are seeing that hey, these Christians aren't the people that I was taught that they are. We had another man go through our program. He had 2 little girls, and when he left, he said to me and to our pastor, well, you didn't get me to become a Christian. I didn't become a Christian while I was here. He said, but I will never teach my kids to hate Christians the way that I was taught when I was a little boy. And that was miraculous, because God saw fit to bring this man from his country in the Middle East to Europe, where he could be exposed to the love of Christ for the first time in his life and see that what he had been taught his whole life was not true. And God was starting to break down those walls, and it changed him. So you can go to the next slide. I think now we really are seeing the answer to this is what we call the refugee crisis in Europe. Is it really a crisis, or is it an opportunity? Because what we're seeing is that this is a God-ordained opportunity to reach the world for Christ in a new way. And so I said that I would get back to my story about Hannah. So Hannah and her mom left, but they had other family that were still living in Greece at the time. And about 2 months after Hannah left, 2 of her brothers and her sister-in-law all accepted Christ as their personal saviors. And I will say also that that was not what we were expecting. I thought she was really close and she didn't make a decision, really didn't think that her other family members were interested, and yet they did. And so just 2 weeks ago, the pictures that you're seeing up here is the baptism of one of Hannah's brothers outside of our Greek church. And the other brother that's in the other picture, he and his wife were actually baptized this past Sunday in Greece. So, we see that God's working, and I don't know what that's going to mean for Hannah, but I can tell you that the first thing that her brothers did when they made a statement of faith is to call their mom and sister and tell them what happened to me. So we see that God's working. He's raising up people from every tribe and every nation, and he said that he would do that. Revelation 7:9, he talks about we are coming from every nation, every tribe, every people, every language before the throne and before the Lamb. And we're seeing that today, that God is working. So I hope that that's also an encouragement to you that God is working, and it's a process. We don't always know what he's doing, but we can see that God has this way. Just look at the cross, this way of taking the ugliest, the hardest, the most painful things and turning that into something that is more beautiful than we can imagine. Even if that struggle that you go through is leaving your home and losing everything that you held dear, but if it brings you to Christ, then God is using that. So I've now been serving there in Greece with Greater Europe Mission as my mission for about 5 years now. We've seen 9 statements of faith. We've seen 6 baptisms. And I've seen several people just see the light bulb come on when they say, I understand now why God brought me to Europe. It was so that I could find him. And just for that realization to see it was worth it, that God is working. And so it's something that's even bigger than this that I had mentioned a little bit in Sunday school this morning. As I'm there and I've learned Greek language, I'm working with a Greek church. And we're seeing that it's not only about the refugees. The refugee crisis in Europe is actually bringing revival into the Greek church in so many ways, because this is something that's right on their doorstep and that God is using to shake up the church there out of apathy. And that is also an amazing thing. So we're just seeing that the opportunities to impact the nations for Christ through Greece, even in just the next 5 years, is just endless. So you can go to the next one. Now I've been there 5 years, and I am just more convinced than ever that God is working there, that that's where I want to be. So I'm off the field now for a 6 months because of a tax regulation for Greece. So after 5 years, I have to be out 6 months. So a few things you can be praying for me as I'm getting ready and hopefully going back at the end of February this year. I am renewing my visa to go back. That's a process that has to be approved every time, and Lord willing, it will be for 3 years that I'll be able to be back. I'm also raising my financial support with Jim that I need to go back. Jim works a little differently than our cooperative program with IMB, so we don't receive salary from them. We raise our own support, so you can be praying as well for God's provision in that as I'm preparing to go back. And finally, just to be able to pray for the refugees that we're working with. If you go forward, I think 2 slides. One more. Yeah. Especially for these people that we're working with. You know, I think we don't always get to see what God is doing, and we don't always get to see the harvest of our prayers and our work here. So I hope this gives you even just a glimpse to see that God is working. So if you feel led to pray, please do pray for Greece and for the Middle East, and those that you can put a name and a face to, and those that you can't. Because it's making a difference. Prayer is the foundation for what we do, and none of this could be happening without prayer. So as well, I also send out a newsletter about every 2 months. So if you're interested and you want to know a little bit more about what we do, just give me your email address, and I'm happy to let you know about that, and just send some stories, kind of what I shared this morning, prayer requests and updates of what we're doing. And if you're interested to give a gift as well, you can see me. And if you are interested to come and visit us, now as COVID is kind of going away a little bit, people are traveling more, we do love to have mission teams that come and work with our Greek church and work especially with our refugee house. So as well, that's something to keep in mind that you are welcome to do. So I do have this morning a little table that's in the back here when you leave that has my prayer cards, has a brochure that talks a little bit more about the ministry, and one that tells you about how you can give a donation if you're interested to do that. So any other questions that you have, I will be here after the service and love to talk more with you or to keep in contact with you. So thank you so much for the time and having you here. It's been great. So thank you, Pastor Jay.
All right. Thank you much. All right. At this time, we're going to take up a love offering for Rachel. Send her off with a love offering. So get your checkbook back out, or get your wallet. If anybody still uses a wallet, I'm not sure. But let's, men, if you'll come, we'll take up a special offering. Thank you. All right, Father, we do pray you'd bless the offering for Rachel, and Lord, prosper her journey. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you would stand with me, we'll just sing this short chorus, very applicable.